It was as though there was something in this which she could not or would not face, as though as soon as she began to speak of this, she, the real Anna, retreated somehow into herself. And another, strange and unaccountable woman came out, whom he didn't love, and whom he feared, and who was in opposition to him. But today he was resolved to have it out. "Whether he knows or not," said Vronsky in his usual quiet and resolute tone, "that's nothing to do with us. We cannot, you cannot continue like this, especially now." "What's to be done, according to you?" she asked with the same frivolous irony. She, who had so feared he would take her condition too lightly, was now vexed with him for deducing from it the necessity of taking some step. "Tell him everything and leave him." "Very well, let's suppose I do that," she said. "Do you know what the result of that would be? I can tell you it all beforehand." And a wicked light gleamed in the eyes that had been so soft a minute before. "Oh, you love another man and have entered into a criminal liaison with him." Mimicking her husband, she threw an emphasis on the word criminal, as Alexey Alexandrovitch did. "I warned you of the consequences from the religious, the civil, and the domestic points of view. You have not listened to me. Now I cannot let you disgrace my name." "And my son," she had meant to say. But about her son she couldn't joke. "Disgrace my name and more in the same style," she added. "In general terms he'll say in his official manner, and with all the distinctness and precision, that he cannot let me go, but will take all measures in his power to prevent scandal. And he will calmly and punctually act in accordance with his words. That's what will happen. He's not a man, but a machine, and a spiteful machine when he's angry," she added, recalling Alexey Alexandrovitch as she spoke, with all the peculiarities of his figure and manner of speaking, and setting against him every defect she could find in him, softening nothing for the great wrong she herself was doing him. "But Anna," said Vronsky in a soft and persuasive voice, trying to soothe her, "we absolutely must, anyway, tell him, and then be guided by the line he takes." "What, run away?" "And why not run away? I don't see how we can keep on like this. And not for my sake. I see that you suffer." "Yes, run away and become your mistress," she said hastily. "Anna," he said with reproachful tenderness. "Yes," she went on, "become your mistress and complete the ruin of—" Again she would have said, "my son," but she couldn't utter that word. Vronsky couldn't understand how she, with her strong and truthful nature, could endure this state of deceit and not desire to get out of it. But he didn't suspect that the chief cause of it was the word son, which she couldn't bring herself to utter. When she thought of her son and his future attitude toward his mother, who had abandoned his father, she felt such terror at what she had done that she couldn't face it. But like a woman, could only try to comfort herself with lying assurances that everything would remain as it always had been, and that it was possible to forget the fearful question of what would be with her son. "I beg you, I entreat you," she said suddenly, taking his hand, and speaking in quite a different tone, sincere and tender. "Never speak to me of that." "But Anna—" "Never. Leave it to me. I know all the baseness, all the horror of my position, but it's not so easy to arrange as you think. And leave it to me and do what I say. Never speak to me of it. Do you promise me? No, promise." "I promise everything. But I can't be at peace, especially after what you've told me. I can't be at peace when you can't be at peace." "I?" she repeated. "Yes, I'm worried sometimes, but that will pass if you will never talk about this. When you talk about it, it's only then it worries me." "I don't understand," he said. "I know," she interrupted him, "how hard it is for your truthful nature to lie, and I grieve for you. I often think that you have ruined your whole life for me." "I was just thinking the very same thing," he said. "How could you sacrifice everything for my sake? I can't forgive myself that you're unhappy." I unhappy, she said, coming closer to him and looking at him with an ecstatic smile of love. I'm like a hungry man who has been given food. He may be cold and dressed in rags and ashamed, but he's not unhappy. I unhappy? No, this is my happiness. She could hear the sound of her son's voice coming toward them, and glancing swiftly around the terrace, she got up impulsively. Her eyes glowed with the fire he knew so well. And with a rapid movement, she raised her lovely hands, covered with rings, took his head, looked a long look into his face, and putting her face to his with smiling, parted lips, swiftly kissed his mouth and both eyes, and pushed him away. She would have gone, but he held her back. When? He murmured in a whisper, gazing in ecstasy at her. Today, at 1 o'clock, she whispered, and with a heavy sigh she walked with her light, swift step to meet her son. Seryozha had been caught by the rain in the big garden, and he and his nurse had taken shelter in an arbor. Well, goodbye, she said to Vronsky. I must soon be getting ready for the races. Betsy promised to fetch me. Vronsky, looking at his watch, went away hurriedly. Chapter 24. When Vronsky looked at his watch on the Karenin's balcony, he was so greatly agitated and lost in his thoughts that he saw the figures on the watch's face, but couldn't realize what time it was. He came out onto the high road and walked, picking his way carefully through the mud to his carriage. He was so completely absorbed in his feeling for Anna that he didn't even think what time it was and whether he had time to go to Bryansky's. He had left him, as often happens, only the external faculty of memory which points out each step one has to take, one after the other. He went up to his coachman, who was dozing on the box in the shadow, already lengthening, of a thick lime tree. He admired the shifting clouds of midges circling over the sweating horses, and waiting the coachman, he jumped into the carriage and told him to drive to Bryansky's. It was only after driving nearly 5 miles that he had sufficiently recovered himself to look at his watch and realize that it was 5:30, and he was late. There were several races fixed for that day: the lifeguards' race, then the officers' 1.5-mile race, then the 3-mile race, and then the race for which he was entered. He could still be in time for his race, but if he went to Bryansky's, he could just about be in time, and he would arrive when the whole of the court would be in their places. That would be a pity. But he had promised Bryansky to come, and so he decided to drive on, telling the coachman not to spare the horses. He reached Bryansky's, spent 5 minutes there, and galloped back. This rapid drive calmed him. All that was painful in his relations with Anna, all the feelings of indefiniteness left by their conversation, had slipped out of his mind. He was thinking now with pleasure and excitement of the race, of his being, after all, on time, and now and then the thought of the blissful meeting awaiting him that night flashed across his imagination like a flaming light. The excitement of the approaching race grew on him as he drove further and further into the atmosphere of the races, overtaking carriages driving up from the summer villas or out of Petersburg. At his quarters, no one was left at home. All were at the races, and his valet was waiting for him at the gate. While he was changing his clothes, his valet told him that the second race had begun already, that a lot of gentlemen had been to ask for him, and a boy had twice run up from the stables. Dressing without hurry — he never hurried himself, and never lost his self-possession — Vronsky drove to the sheds. From the sheds he could see a perfect sea of carriages, and people on foot, soldiers surrounding the track, and pavilions swarming with people. The second race was apparently going on, for just as he went into the sheds, he heard a bell ringing. Going toward the stable, he met the white-legged chestnut, Mahotin's gladiator, being led to the track in a blue-bordered orange covering, with what looked like huge ears edged with blue. "Where's Cord?" he asked the stable boy. "In the stable, putting on the saddle." In the open horse box stood Fufu, saddled, ready. They were just going to lead her out. "I'm not too late." All right, said the Englishman. Don't upset yourself. Vronsky once more took in one glance the exquisite lines of his favourite mare, who was quivering all over, and with an effort he tore himself from the sight of her and went out of the stable. He went towards the pavilions at the best moment for escaping attention. The mile-and-a-half race was just finishing, and all eyes were fixed on the officer of the Horse Guards in front and the hussar behind, urging their horses on with a last effort close to the winning post. And a group of soldiers and officers of the Horse Guards were shouting loudly their delight at the expected triumph of their officer and comrade. Vronsky moved into the middle of the crowd unnoticed, almost at the very moment when the bell rang at the finish of the race, and the tall, mud-spattered Horse Guards officer who came in first, bending over the saddle, let go the reins of his panting grey horse that looked dark with sweat. The horse, stiffening out its legs with an effort, stopped its rapid course, and the officer of the Horse Guards looked about him like a man waking up from a heavy sleep, and just managed to smile. A crowd of friends and outsiders pressed round him. Vronsky intentionally avoided that select crowd of the upper world, which was moving and talking freely, but with discretion, before the pavilions. He knew that Madame Karenina was there, and Betsy, and his brother's wife, and he purposely didn't go near them for fear of something distracting his attention. But he was continually met and stopped by acquaintances who told him about the previous races and kept asking him why he was so late. At the time when the racers had to go to the pavilion to receive the prizes, and all attention was directed to that point, Vronsky's elder brother, Alexander, a colonel with heavy fringed epaulets, came up to him. He was not tall, though as broadly built as Alexei, and handsomer and ruddier than he. He had a red nose and an open, drunken-looking face. "Did you get my note?" he said. "One never can find you." Alexander Vronsky, in spite of the dissolute life and, in particular, the drunken habits for which he was notorious, was quite a courtier. Now, as he talked to his brother of a matter bound to be exceedingly disagreeable to him, knowing that the eyes of many people might be fixed upon him, he kept a smiling countenance, as though he was jesting with his brother about something of little importance. "I got it, and I really can't make out what you are worrying yourself about," said Alexei. "I'm worrying myself because the remark has just been made to me that you weren't here, and that you were seen in Peterhof on Monday. There are matters that only concern those directly interested in them, and the matter you are so worried about is—" "Yes, but if so, you may as well leave the service. I beg you not to interfere, and that's all I have to say." Alexei Vronsky's frowning face turned white, and his prominent lower jaw quivered, which happened rarely with him. Being a man of very warm heart, he was seldom angry. But when he was angry, and when his chin quivered, then, as Alexander Vronsky knew, he was dangerous. Alexander Vronsky smiled gaily. "I only wanted to give you Mother's letter. Answer it, and don't worry about anything just before the race. Bonne chance," he added, smiling, and he moved away from him. But after him another friendly greeting brought Vronsky to a standstill. "So you won't recognize your friends. How are you, mon cher?" said Stepan Arkadyevitch, as conspicuously brilliant in the midst of all the Petersburg brilliance as he was in Moscow, his face rosy and his whiskers sleek and glossy. "I came up yesterday, and I'm delighted that I shall see your triumph. When shall we meet?" "Come tomorrow to the mess," said Vronsky, and squeezing him by the sleeve of his coat, with apologies, he moved away to the center of the track, where the horses were being led in for the great steeplechase. The horses who had run in the last race were being led home, steaming and exhausted by the stable boys, and one after another the fresh horses for the coming race made their appearance, for the most part English racers, wearing hoods and looking with their girthed bellies like strange, huge birds. On the right, Frou-Frou was led in, lean and beautiful, lifting up her elastic, rather long pasterns as though moved by springs. Not far from her, they were taking the cloth off the lop-eared gladiator. The strong, exquisite, perfectly correct lines of the stallion, with his superb hindquarters and excessively short pasterns almost over his hoofs, attracted Vronsky's attention in spite of himself. He would have gone up to his mare, but he was again detained by an acquaintance. "Oh, there's Karenin," said the acquaintance with whom he was chatting. "He's looking for his wife, and she's in the middle of the pavilion. Didn't you see her?" "No," answered Vronsky, and without even glancing around toward the pavilion where his friend was pointing out Madame Karenina, he went up to his mare. Vronsky had not had time to look at the saddle, about which he had to give some direction, when the competitors were summoned to the pavilion to receive their numbers and places in the row at start.